Well, I want to welcome you to our evening service, and I want to mention right away that our singing time, our congregational singing, is going to be streamlined tonight, and that is because we want to have a review of summer ministry, both to thank the Lord, praise the Lord, and also be stirred about ministry that He has for us down the road here. So want to just mention that to you. I also didn't get a chance this morning to welcome the newly married couple here for the first time in our services. Good to have Jonathan and Candace. I see people want to clap for them. There you go. You normally only get to kiss on your anniversary in church, but first occasion, well, they did it, so good for you. I did look at you this morning, and I had to take a second look because Jonathan had his arm around her, hugging pretty close. I'm like, what are they? Oh, yeah, they're married. Okay. So glad to see all that. Hug away, all right? Let's turn to 455. We are going to sing, My Jesus, I Love Thee. I know Thou art mine. I want to get you thinking about it. I think you can sing it, and you can sing it in reality. But if you're like me, I almost can never sing this without saying, Lord, I do love you, but my love needs to grow. And even as I'm singing this song, may the expressions be more and more true and help me to love you more. So let's stand together as we sing 455, My Jesus, I Love You.
Thank you. You may be seated. 454. 454 on the theme this evening with the missions teams giving us their report. Give me a passion for souls, dear Lord, a passion to save the lost. Jesus, I long to be winning men who are lost and constantly sinning. Let's stand to sing all three stanzas, 454. Be seated.
Psalm 112:7 says, "He shall not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is fixed, trusting in the Lord." And as I've been meditating on this verse and this song this week, I've thought how each of us, no matter what age or stage we're at in life, it seems the Lord constantly has new ways for us to learn to trust Him. Trust Him when your soul is burdened with the weight of all its sin. He will speak the words of pardon. He will make you clean within. Trust Him when dark doubts assail you. Trust Him when your strength is small. Trust Him when to simply trust Him seems the hardest thing of all. Trust in God. Jesus' name you plead. Trust him when your cares are many. Trust him when your friends are few. And the time of much temptation is the time to trust him too. Trust in God. Trust him, he is ever faithful. Trust him, for his will is best. Trust him, for the heart of Jesus is the only place of rest. Trust him through the cloud and sunshine. All your cares upon him cast, till the storm of life is over and the trusting days are past. Put your trust in God. Trust in God.
Amen. Thank you for that. We are excited tonight to hear from several of the summer ministries, and you can see there on the screen what we're going to be hearing from. We do have a few that are not able to be here tonight. The Krolls got in back to the States 6 last night, and they were going to play it by ear if they could be here tonight, but Daniel was saying it'll be like 1 a.m. for our bodies, and so they are resting, hopefully. Dr. Barry's also gone, and Andrew, so we won't hear from the Philippines trip, but we'll hear from these, and looking forward to it. And the focus tonight is, you can see these things, it is some of the external ministries, and none of that is to minimize what went on here week by week, and do want to just give an opportunity to hear some of these, though. And I was listening to, I'm a big podcast guy when I'm driving. 1.75 speed is kind of my happy spot. And anyways, I don't know why I said that. But I was listening to this podcast this week from this pastor, and he's got these big organizations. He's got this kind of this blog ministry. He has an institute. They've got a Christian school, a couple other things. And he's like, he said, one of the things we have to keep reminding ourselves is we have all these extra ministries that are so exciting, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that what God has ordained is the ordinary means of grace. And the ordinary means of grace aren't always the most exciting. The things that are out there are more exciting. It's in the name ordinary. And that's where faithfulness comes in, right? Keep committing ourselves to the ordinary means of grace. And so I don't want to minimize all of that went through the summer, but a special opportunity tonight. I trust this will be encouraging. This is the order we'll go in, so those of you presenting, we'll just go one after another, and turn it back over to Pastor at the end.
All right, well, Sandra really wanted to give this report because she loves speaking in front of people, but she thought she'd give me the chance to do it. Well, we were able to go out this summer to Manhattan, Kansas, where Nathan and Karis Herbster are at. And even this morning, Mr. Rose was talking about in Ephesians, different gifts that God gives to people in the church. And this, the vision for this really flowed out of, with Sandra and I, realizing some gifts that God has given us. We both had the opportunity to play basketball, not at an incredibly high level, but at a little higher level. And so we've always just tried to think about how can we use basketball to advance the gospel, to magnify God, magnify Christ. And so this This really was a trial run of something that I have wanted to do for a while, and that we're hoping that maybe we can do again in the future. But the goal with what we did, and I'll explain some of the things that we did, but with the goal of what we were doing was to go do basketball and build relationships and get contacts for the sake of turning those contacts over to the local church so that they could continue to have sustained ministry. In Manhattan, where the missions trip was last year with Nathan and Karis, we had about 30 to 40 teenage boys come out to the 3-on-3 tournament. And it really does seem to be a great way to connect with especially younger boys through basketball and give the church an opportunity to build relationships with them and continue ministry down the road. So that was what we did there. That was our goal. So we left Wednesday morning. We flew into Kansas City, which is about a 2-hour drive from Manhattan, Kansas, where Nathan and Karis are at. And we really wanted to stop and get some barbecue because Kansas City barbecue is world famous there. But we didn't do that. We made it straight to Manhattan. We were there for the Wednesday night service. Nathan asked me on the way to the church if I could speak for the kids club. So I did that as well. Some of the things we've done with summer camp helped me prepare for that. But then the rest of the time, we had camp Thursday and Friday. And we had about 15 to 20 kids come out for camp. That was more of an elementary age group that we had for the camp. We gave the gospel at each of those. They're more like clinics. We gave the gospel. We got all their contact information. And then Saturday, we did a 3-on-3 tournament with a high school age. And we had about 20 to 25 in that same age group. A lot of the same kids from last year came. So it was good to have sustained ministry with some of those. One of the most positive things that came out of that was one of the kids who came, one of the family, there was a boy and a girl who came to the basketball camp. Their mom came as well. There was a 3-on-3 tournament for the little kids that was happening with a different organization. And after our camp, we went and watched them play in this 3-on-3 tournament afterwards with a different group. But the mom was there, and we ended up being able to talk to this mom for, it was about an hour, just about different things, and Nathan and Karis got connected with them. And they said they were coming to church. I don't know if it happened. I actually haven't talked to them since then. But that was just one example of how this was a great opportunity to obviously give the gospel during the basketball times, but just build relationships with the families and people in the community. Coming back Monday, we were able to minister in the church, preach Sunday night. We did some ministry things. I don't know if you remember this time, though, but this was when Microsoft had the big blow up and all the airports and flights were going crazy. So we actually, again, it was God's providence. Somehow we got a flight to Atlanta, and then we're able to have my dad drive us home. But if that hadn't worked out just that way, we were going to be stuck in Kansas City or Detroit or wherever we got a flight to for a while. So it was a little eventful coming back, but in general, it was a great time. It felt like vacation for us because we were obviously so busy here, and to only have 1 or 2 things to worry about out there was a sigh of relief for us. But it really was a great time of ministry there. A lot of relationships and contacts developed for the church there, and the gospel was presented.
Well, I had a great opportunity to go to New Hampshire at the end of July, and that was a really cool opportunity to go up there. Thank you for praying. It was awesome. I wish I could have pictures up. I didn't have a chance to get that, but it was beautiful up there. And the Lord provided the money I needed to go, and it was really cool opportunity. So I flew out Monday, July 8th, and then came back the 22nd, and so really 2 big things that stuck out from just the ministry side of things. I just thought I would say these right at the beginning and then just talk about what I did there. 2 things that really stuck out was just Pastor Chris is the pastor up there that I was helping out, and just his faithfulness and his love for the people there was awesome. It was so cool to see, and really it's such a hard ministry up there. A lot of the culture is you don't go to church and you're proud that you don't go to church. And it's a hard ministry, but he is just so faithful. And really, all the people I talk to, they just love him because he loves the people and he preaches the word. And that's key. So that was just really cool. And then the other thing was just the church people. They were just, a lot of them first-generation Christians, but they just love God. and just had the mind of Christ. Philippians 2 just flowed out of them, and that was just super cool to see. But I flew in Monday about 3, and then got to the church about 4:30, started VBS at 5:30. So right off the bat into VBS, and it was a little struggle at the beginning, but really church people were really great and helped me jump in right away. I facilitated, helped them kind of set up, tear down, and get to station. We do it a little the same way we do it here, and then help with game time and the penny parade. So a couple responsibilities there, so it was cool to help with that. And then the second week, that was the first week, and then the second week helped with ministering on the Sunday, and then on Monday jumped right into helping pastor with yard work, worked at the church, really just shadowed him. We went to some shut-ins, got to share scripture with a couple people that were struggling, and just different opportunities like that. Just really cool opportunity to just kind of get the life of a small town pastor. So we got to do that. Did some sightseeing as well. Got to see Boston for a day. Went there. It was really cool. Really cool to see the city, and went to the coast a little bit. Got to try lobster, as they call it up in New England. I'm sure Mr. Rose knows that. And that was really good. Loved it. And it was just really cool to see another part of the country. Even cool to, we get stuck in this, I get stuck in this bubble we have here in Greenville, and it's so easy to just get in the mindset that everywhere is like this, but it's not. And it was cool to see another ministry. I also visited another pastor up there. I can't remember his name right now, but he started a church there 30 years ago and is still there, faithfully ministering. And it was really cool to talk to him and just kind of ask him, had about a couple hours just to ask him different questions about his ministry and what struggles he had. He actually was from North Carolina, so he kind of knew the culture down here a little bit, knew where I was coming from. So able to talk to him and see just his perspective. But a lot of the ministry up there is really just relationship building. It's not a lot of door to door. They don't do a lot of that. Really, the mindset up there is they don't trust many people. It's very they don't really. It's very different. It's not like everybody's nice to each other. It's like, I'll help you, but I don't like you. Like, it's weird. But really, they just said they get in the communities, and they get into rec leagues, they get into different organizations, and they just seek to build bridges with people, and that's really how they've grown their churches and minister to people. But their faithfulness was just abundant and really cool to see. And then the second Sunday, I was able to minister in music, help them with their piano playing a little bit, and got to play it wasn't my cello, actually. They provided a cello for me to play for them as well, which was a big deal for them because they don't have any special music, which was a very big difference from what we have here. So it was cool to minister in that way. And then Sunday night, I got to preach the sermon I actually preached here a few weeks ago, and that was also really cool. Able to work with pastor and even critique my sermon a little bit and make it a little better for that second time, which was great. So I would just say, moving out of that, continue to pray for me as I seek to know the Lord's mind of what He wants me to do, and continue to seek Him in these years ahead. And even as a young man, I want to serve God with my life. So just continue to pray that I would know the next right step that He has for me. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. It is so cool to hear about all of the ministry that goes on all across the U.S. and then even around the world. I got to be at the Wilds of North Carolina for 10 weeks this summer, and Samuel gave me 2 minutes to talk about it. So I will not get through everything, but God was so good to me this summer. I had an amazing time. So this is my second summer as a lead counselor, but it was my 6th summer being at the Wilds. And so the Wilds has made a huge impact on my life. It is an incredible place. This summer, I was very busy. It's kind of a 24/7 kind of job as lead counselor, and you're kind of a counselor to the counselors, and then you also counsel the campers as well. So you kind of hit everybody. And the counselors come to you with all of their problems, all their problem children, and everything like that. So it's crazy. It's a busy job. Camp is awesome, but it's very emotionally draining and physically draining, but also so spiritually refreshing. Every week, I got to sit under so many awesome preachers. Every day, I got to really be influenced by a lot of really godly people who work at the Wilds full time. So I am so thankful for all of those opportunities that I had. I had so many stories that I could share, but since I only have like a minute, I'm only going to stick with one. But if you want to hear more stories, you should come talk to me. I love talking about campers. I love talking about counselors. I had an awesome team. I was on the blue team. And Monday of like probably week 6 or 7, so it was like halfway through the summer, really tired. Everyone's kind of down. I was feeling a little emotionally drained. And Monday is just like, whew, you get all these campers and you're like, okay, we can do this. Monday night came, and after the service, and I don't get campers in my cabin. I am just kind of there for the counselors who have their own campers. But that Monday night after the service, a camper came up to me, and I literally hadn't met her yet. And she was like, hey, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. So we like sit down outside the activity center, and she shares something with me that she hasn't told anyone ever. And it was kind of a big deal. And I was just so humbled that she would tell me about it, first of all. And then I was like, oh, I gotta counsel this girl. So I was like, hey, and it was 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, so, hey, can we talk tomorrow? Can we talk about this? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. So I counseled her Tuesday and Wednesday, and was just able to pour into her and tell her God's love and share the goodness of God in her life. And it was awesome. And then really because of the things she was struggling with, we had to call her parents. And so I was really struggling. I was like, I gotta tell her this. She's not gonna be very happy with me. But I knew I had to do the right thing. So I sat down with her on Thursday, and I had the conversation about having to talk to her parents about what she struggled with. And she was so angry with me. I mean, she was just so mad. And I was like, you know what, I totally understand, but this is something we have to do because of your safety. And so we ended up calling her mom, and she was still really angry with me. And I was like, you know what, you did the right thing. And I was really trying to point her to truth over and over again. And so by the end of that week, I was so burdened for her. She did the right thing, but she was still really struggling. And she wouldn't talk to me. So from Thursday morning when we called her mom to literally the rest of the week, she didn't want to have anything to do with me, even after I'd had several conversations with her. And then on Friday night after the service, she comes up to me and she gives me a big hug. And I was like, oh, hi. And she was like, I am so thankful for you. Sorry, I wasn't planning on crying. But she was just like, God opened my eyes. And he showed me that you made me take that step. And it's something I had to do, but it was the right thing to do. And she was like, now I can grow because that's out in the open and I can move on. And I was like, yes, you can. Sorry. So God was so good in just giving me that week halfway through the summer, and I was like, whew, okay, I can do it. I can get through the rest of the summer. And I mean, you can ask me, I had a crazy week on my last week of camp. I had some insane campers that wanted to kill me. But God works, and he was so good, and he sustained me. And I'm so thankful for all of you and your prayers and your support. I couldn't have done it without that. And I was so thankful for every Sunday that I got to come back here and be refreshed. But, just in closing, God was so faithful to me. And he really used this summer to really nail down what I believe and what I'm going to do with what I believe. And so I'm just so thankful for the Wilds and how I got to serve. I know that was a little bit longer than 2 minutes, but yeah, come talk to me if you want to see pictures and hear any more stories.
So you're going to be able to tell that I'm not the speech teacher. She is, so I don't really like doing this, but it's okay. So my name's Bethany, as a lot of you know. This is my third summer counseling at the Wilds, actually, and it was incredible again. I was so thankful for the opportunity, again, to do 10 weeks, like Julia said. The Wilds is such a unique place just to see fellow believers work alongside you and to invest in campers over and over and over again, even if they don't like you or want to hang out with you at all. We did so many fun things, like Big Ball on Monday night, which is just a blast. Fun time, and feet ball on Thursday. But the most important thing we got to do was just share truth over and over and over again with campers. It's just such an incredible gift to see the truth change them, like from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. And even like Julia said, we were over and over under the preaching of God's word, and like 7 or 8 times a day we were talking about God. We were having conversations, having those truth conversations, and just how God was just using that in campers' lives, but also in my life, and how the campers recognized their sin, and then by the end of the week they would be like, okay, this is how I change, and then this is how I'm gonna go home and like use this, even in the lives of my siblings and stuff like that. I had one specific story that I wanted to share with you. This was actually not my camper, but I got to talk with one of them after a service, and one of the leads tapped me on the shoulder and she was like, hey, can you come talk to this camper? And she wasn't in my cabin or on my team, so I was like, oh yeah, sure. It was actually like one of the first that I had gotten to talk to after a service at all. So I went out and I started talking to her, and it was actually so cool because she was struggling with some of the same things that I was struggling with. A lot of you know that I was in the hospital. At the beginning of the summer, and that kind of rocked my world a little bit. I did not plan that. I wasn't expecting that. And it was definitely scary, and just to not know like what was wrong, or what God was gonna do through that. So as I was talking to this camper, she was struggling with some physical stuff, just with her knee and her leg, because she had, in her first basketball game, like thrown it out and dislocated it and torn some stuff. And so as I was talking to her, she was just like, my heart was so hard from what God was doing in my body, and I recognized the sin in my life because of the sin that was in her life. And even as we both were able to talk to each other, we both were like, okay, so what are we gonna do with this? We recognize this in our lives, and we recognize this sin, but now how are we gonna move forward? And how are we going to realize how to change? And it was just so cool to I didn't even realize that there was hardness in my heart toward even God, and letting that happen. But just the fact that I was able to talk to her, and she wasn't even in my cabin, it was just so clearly God doing that for me. So I want to thank you all for praying. It was incredible just to be at the Wilds again. And like Julia said, it was so good to come back here on Sunday and just be refreshed and reminded of like why we're doing this. So thank you.
All right, so I don't know if y'all remember, but at the beginning of the summer, there was a slide similar to this, and it had like all the ministries people were involved in, and it had all their names, and I was not on that list because I had not like committed to a ministry for the whole summer. But because of that, God allowed me to have to be involved in so many different ministries, and I'm really thankful for that. I got to just spend a week here and there, and 3 weeks at camp. So I got to go down to Southland for 3 weeks, and not 10. I'm sure it, from what I experienced in 3 weeks, I'm sure 10 weeks is just amazing experience. But so I went down to Southland for 3 weeks, and I had no idea what I was doing. They put me in there, and I didn't go to staff training, and I had never done it before. So it was just trial by fire. But God was good, and honestly, like the staff, full-time staff and summer staff is amazing at Southland. They were all so encouraging, including Abby and Joe, the team leads on my team, and then even the team leads on the other team were super encouraging to me. They were always telling me I'm doing great. I'm like, why are you encouraging me? I'm not even on your team. But it was just a blessing to have people supporting me, even though I knew it was like, man, if only you knew how this was going, how I feel like it's going. I felt pretty out of my depth, I'll say that. But I think one of the coolest things was the first week. I kind of was like okay with not getting everything right because it was my first week. But the second week I was like, all right, I need to do better in some things. And it started off in like the first couple days. It was just like I was like, man, I feel like I should be doing so much better. Like I've had experience in this now. But it was so cool to see how God was working in the hearts of my campers when I felt like I was not getting everything right. Like we have one-on-ones where you're basically just supposed to have a one-on-one conversation with a camper and just kind of get to how they're doing spiritually. And I had only done like a couple of them by like Wednesday. But a couple of my campers responded to gospel invitations that week. And I got to go out and counsel them, and they both made a profession of faith. And it was pretty cool because one of the things at camp is that you only get to see them for 1 week, and you don't really know if you're going to be able to stay in contact with them. But that week, I was able to meet the youth pastor of one of them, one of the youth pastors from one of their churches. And so I have his contact information. I'm able to keep in touch with him. And then after camp, the other guy that made a profession, he texted me and he was like, dude, that was the most fun I've ever had. He had never been to camp before, but he was like, that was the most fun I've ever had. I'm so glad I got to come to camp. And I was like, that's awesome. And then a couple weeks ago, he texted me and he was like, hey, can you pray for me? He's going through a hard time with a family situation. And just he just said to me, he was like, I know God's using this for good, and he's going to work it out in his time, but just pray for me. And it was just a blessing to see that kind of, evidence of God working in his heart. And a lot of kids come from, backgrounds that aren't great, and it's just an awesome opportunity to get to go love them at camp. And that's something God challenged me with, was just how much do I love others. It's so easy to get focused on ourselves, but when you have 7 or 8 guys and you like have this checklist of things that you're supposed to do, and you could check that list off, but if you're really going to make an impact, you have to actually genuinely love them. And that's something God really challenged me with at camp, and it was really a blessing to be involved in that.
I also had the privilege of being at Southland this summer, and it was my 4th summer at Southland. And if you know me at all, I grew up at camp, and I grew up, from the time I could walk, I was cheering, cheering all the camp cheers. And I remember getting to the end of final scoring this last summer, and I looked at one of my friends and I said, my body hurts for the first time since I have cheered. I think this is the Lord telling me that I'm too old for cheering and too old for camp, but not to say I won't cheer anymore. But so this is my 4th summer. I did feel a little bit, kind of like Julia said, kind of like a dinosaur there, with nobody really I knew that was returning. But the Lord did a lot in my heart, did a lot in the campers' hearts, a lot in the counselors' hearts. My role this summer was lead counselor and team leader. They're kind of a little bit separate at Southland. So they lumped both of them together and gave them to me and my cousin Michaela. And so we each got to lead a team, and then it also did like the crisis counseling, which is the abuse situations and the suicide, all those harder things. And honestly, when I heard that I was going to do the counseling side, the crisis counseling, I was terrified. And knowing that I had to deal with the discipleship of counselors, I was really excited about that, the discipleship of the girls on my team. But really the fear of, I've never had anything in my life as serious as these girls are dealing with, and what am I going to say to them? What scripture am I going to give them? Am I going to say the right thing? And the Lord really just used that to show me that his grace truly is sufficient when we are weakest. And he used Psalm 121, I lift my eyes into the hills from whence my help comes. My help comes from the Lord. And so truly dwelling on that throughout the summer with, situations that were thrown at me, knowing that my help does come from God. So that was kind of my role this summer. It was my second summer as the team lead, so I kind of knew a little bit what I was doing with the team side of things, but was new with the more discipleship and counseling side of things with the girls. I learned a lot this summer. I already mentioned that I learned to rely on the Lord's strength. I'm sure anybody who's been at camp can say that. You exert yourself physically and emotionally, and even though I didn't have a cabin, it's still exerting energy and all of that. So learning to rely on the Lord for energy and for strength. And then something else that I learned came from really the Sunday afternoon services we had at camp, at the church there near the camp. And the speaker really went through why we should reflect and preach ourselves the gospel daily, why we should continue to use the gospel in our own lives and not just in the lives of others. And at camp, you preach the gospel, you tell kids the gospel all the time, and that's kind of just what you do at camp to make sure that they're saved and to share that with them. And I really was reminded of the importance of preaching that to myself daily, and how my ministry must be motivated by the gospel and what Christ has done in my life. And until I realize fully, I'll never realize fully what Christ has done for me and dying for me, but until I fully realize what Christ did in dying for me and loving me, I will not be able to love others as I should. And so just like Paul, you think of, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, all his epistles preaching or talking about his motivation being the gospel. We should let our motive of ministry and of life be the gospel. Preach it to ourselves daily, living in light of our salvation, and working out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And then that next verse, letting God do the work in us and through us. And that was just a big encouragement to me this summer, to preach the gospel to myself daily, not just to the campers, and then letting God do the work in me and through me in the lives of others this summer. Thank you so much for praying. If you don't recognize me, I've been in and out for a number of years now, but I always come back and am refreshed with your encouragement and your prayers, and so I really appreciate you welcoming me in again this year as I teach in ECS. But thank you so much for your prayers and your support and your encouragement.
Alrighty, well, I got the opportunity to work here at Summer Day Camp, and that's a ministry of both Easley Christian School and our church here. And it's been neat to see that grow over the time that I've been here, and I remember coming down for the first time. We came in the middle of the summer before my parents got down here, and I think we saw Hannah and Daniel were the ones kind of really heading up most of this camp, and just getting to see them interacting with, I think maybe there was like 13 kids or something like that, and now it's really grown to, I think we had maybe around 60 or so kids around here this summer, and just really getting the opportunity to impact a lot of young lives. A lot of the kids go to the school. Some of them come in for the summer, and I think it's been the case the last couple of summers. Sometimes the kids come in for summer day camp, and then they end up coming to the school here. I know I saw a couple of the kids that we ministered to this summer here in school. But really just, it's a really neat opportunity. There's part of the day that's very structured, and so we have a chapel time, a game time. We teach the kids some songs in our music time. There's a program at the end of the summer. We try to do some upkeep with some of their academics. We did some drama electives, some sports electives, some sports camps and things like that. So it's basically, when I'm telling people about what I did this summer, I usually say it's somewhere in between a glorified daycare and a glorified VBS, kind of all mixed up together. So, but it's a really neat opportunity to be able to be with these kids 5 days out of the week. And a lot of them come from a lot of different backgrounds. You have kids who are in great homes, who have really good parents who are teaching them the Bible, who are taking care of them, who are loving them. You have some kids who maybe they have both parents in home, but both parents work a lot of the time, and they get dropped off early in the summer, and then they get picked up late, and probably most of what they do is go home, go to bed, and they do it all over again, and so they really don't see much of their parents. And then you have some homes that are broken, and a lot of kids, maybe they're struggling with behavior issues, but when you kind of take a look at their home situation, a lot of it is because they don't really get much attention at home, and that doesn't excuse their behavior, but a lot of it is just crying out for that attention because they don't get that attention and love at home. And so really it's an opportunity to come alongside them, love them, and care for them, show them the love of Christ. And so it's a really great opportunity. And some of the greatest opportunities from the gospel come from dealing with behavior. It's usually like, all right, you shouldn't have done that. Let's step out into the hallway and talk about this for a minute. But through that, you get to be able to come alongside them and say, okay, do you really understand that this is coming out of a sinful heart and you need Jesus to save you from that? And I remember one particular time this summer, there was one of the girls was struggling because she was having some friend drama. And I think she's in like 5th grade or something like that, and with 2 of the other girls, and feeling like, oh man, my friends don't really like me, or that type of thing. But as we talked through the situation, she was just coming back to this realization of, man, I'm not being kind to my friends, and yet for some reason they don't leave me. For some reason they don't stop being my friend. And it was really interesting. Like, why don't they just leave me? Why do they keep being my friend? And through that, just being able to point her back to, okay, think about this. This is why they don't leave you, and think about what Christ has done for you. And do you have any right to have anything from Christ? Should Christ really love you? Should he really be there for you still? And getting the opportunity to share the gospel through that Jesus loved you so much that even when you haven't done anything to merit his favor, he still loves you and even died on the cross for you. And so that was a neat opportunity to share the gospel with her. But one of the biggest things I think that I took away from this summer was even the ministry that it was to my own heart. We talked, our program this summer was centered around the life of William Borden. And if any of you know his life, he was from a very rich background. His parents were very wealthy. And so he was heir to all kinds of money, went to school. I forget exactly what school it was he went to, but went to Bible school. But had I think for I forget what it was, his graduation present or something like that, his parents took him on a trip around the world, okay? Pretty neat. But instead of, going through the world prideful of his background, he really came out of that seeing, okay, there is needy people all around the world, and really came back to the States and wanted to give his life to missions, and ended up going to do some language training, and at 25 years of age, he caught an illness and ended up dying. But he's famous for saying, no reserve, no retreat, no regret. And he was willing to give his life fully and completely to Christ. And that, as we were rehearsing that with the kids, we sang a song, and somebody put those words to music. And that, along with, we talked about one of our chapel times, we talked about the life of Jim Elliot and his sacrifice of his own life for the sake of the gospel. We also were going through the life of Joseph and just his unwavering trust in God, willing to give up anything for Christ, for God and his testimony for God. And those really had a huge impact in my life, that this life, there's a lot of good things that we can spend our time in. And there's a lot of wholesome things that we can engage in. But are those things really worth it when we are faced with questions of not only is this sinful for me to be doing, like we were talking about this morning, but really a better question is to ask, okay, does this promote the cause of Christ? Am I giving up everything? Am I giving everything that I have every moment of every day? And the choices that I'm making, are they all centered around Christ, or am I keeping things back from Christ, holding on to little tidbits of my life going, okay, God, you can have that part of my life, but I'm going to hold this choice over here or that choice over here. And just even being challenged through our summer day camp and some of the themes that we were talking about with the kids, to really just give everything to Christ and hold nothing back and give everything to him. So, yeah, that's something I learned. And Boogie, before you come, Hannah's going to come. So.
Well, my name is not up there, but my boss from the summer told me I was speaking tonight, so I am listening to my younger brother. Well, this summer, and actually the last couple summers, my role at summer camp had been to be the program director. So throughout the summer, I would work with the kids on a drama, with songs, kind of like a musical, and then we'd present it at the end of the summer. Well, this summer, I was definitely very great with child, so I had a lot of help in pulling it off. Whenever I just couldn't make it in because I wasn't feeling well, Kara Seymour would fill in for me. And then due to Titus's birth, I actually missed the last week of camp and the program, so Jonathan Swaffer filled in for me and directed that. So very thankful for that. All summer long, the kids would ask me, Mrs. Messer, when are you having your baby? And I would tell them, as soon as you're ready for the program, my baby can be born. And that's kind of what happened. That last week that I was at camp, the pieces finally fell into place, and we were able to have one last good rehearsal before I turned it over to Jonathan. And my granny had actually just gotten into town, so I asked her to come to that rehearsal and be a practice audience for the kids. And when we were wrapping up the rehearsal, I looked over at her and she was crying. And I thought, oh no, I just brought my newly widowed granny to this, and this was too heavy of a topic, and so I was feeling bad about that. But when I was talking to her afterwards, she said that the reason she was tearing up was because while Jonathan Swaffer and Daniel and I were growing up in Wisconsin, she came to many programs that we were in as children. And now it was a blessing for her to see us as adults investing in the next generation and giving them the opportunities we had as children. So that was really challenging for me to stop and be thankful for the people that invested in us as children and helped give us the vision for what we're trying to do with our summer campers. It also sobered me to pray for the kids that we had this summer, that God would raise up leaders from this specific group of kids that would invest in their generation to come when we are long off the scene. Another challenging thing from the summer was the actual program. The theme for our summer was Walk Worthy, and Daniel had asked me to base the program around an example of someone who had walked worthy. And a couple years ago, I'd heard James sing the song that Jonathan was talking about called No Reserves, No Retreat, No Regret. And actually, Mrs. Berry helped me track down the music for that. And so that we based our program off of William Borden's life, and that was our theme song for the program. And I'd had that in my head for years, and I'd always wanted to do something with it, so I was really glad for this opportunity. Jonathan already told a little bit of that story if you're not familiar with it. I had to do some research into his life to write the program, and I actually found a newspaper article from that time frame, and the headline was, Young Millionaire Renounces World to Be a Missionary. So it was really fascinating looking into all that and seeing how fascinated the people of that time frame were with this story. And if you're familiar with the story, he actually never made it to the mission field. He was on the way to China where he was going to go. He stopped in another country on the way to start working on the language, and that's where he contracted spinal meningitis and died there, and at the age of 25. And we're tempted to think that Borden must have been so disappointed that his life was not spent the way that he had thought it would be as a missionary. But we can be confident that those were not Borden's thoughts, because sometime during that sickness, knowing he was going to die, was when he wrote those final last two words, no regrets. Borden was content for his life to be used in whatever way God saw fit, even if it meant in death. And being immersed in his story this summer, I realized that I have a tendency to want to protect my life. I think that God can't be glorified in my life if I'm dead. However, a life that is truly surrendered to God, God can use in unimaginable ways, whether that's life or death. And Borden's untimely death continues to impact people up to this day. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity I had to be challenged through working at our summer camp with this story. And I trust that his story will continue to have an impact on our campers' lives as well.
Well, this summer I was up at Heritage Baptist Church in Frankfort, Illinois. It's about 35 minutes south of Chicago, and my uncle is the pastor there. It was a pastoral internship requirement for my major at Bob Jones University. But it was a busy summer, and when I got there, I wasn't quite sure all of what I was going to be doing. And the first thing that I found out I was supposed to be doing when I got there was leading the congregational singing. And I'm like, Uncle Keith, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do that. And he's like, well, you better figure out before Sunday. So that was a little out of my comfort zone at first. The music director, his son actually was diagnosed with cancer at the start of the summer. He was out in Arizona the whole summer. The Lord opened up that door for me to be able to do that. And there are a lot of other responsibilities. I was in charge of getting the choir rolling again, leading junior church, singing and playing solos and duets, organizing small groups, preaching 3 times on Sundays, hospital visits, Monday Bible studies, building the VBS set and float. That was definitely not my gifting. I'm thankful for men like Mr. Martin and Mr. Delatorre that are very skilled with that kind of thing. Also, another thing that is not my gifting, writing the VBS skit. That took a long time. And then I was in charge of running the skit rehearsals. I was even the bad guy in the skit. Had a lot of kids stepping on my toes, punching me, kicking me, so don't want to be the bad guy ever again. I was in charge of running game time at VBS, made a VBS Week in Review video. We tore out the old pews in the auditorium, and we got new church chairs. We started up our brand new Friday Night Kids Club after VBS, and the list can go on and on. So needless to say, it was a pretty busy summer. But VBS was definitely like one of the crucial weeks in the summer, a huge outreach opportunity. And we're very thankful for a lot of brand new contacts. We probably had around 65 different kids throughout the week, and there were a lot of needs, a lot of roles to fill, and I was scrambling I must have called 7 or 8 guys trying to get Josiah, other people to try and come help us. And I think it was Thursday, like 3 days before VBS, I called Mrs. Delatorre and Dr. Barry, and I asked if Jacob and Andrew could come. And actually, Jacob's going to come at this time and give a short little testimony, but they were able to be there for our VBS week, and they were a huge blessing, jumped in right away with the VBS skit, and did a Wednesday night nursing home service. So Jacob's going to give a quick little testimony about the VBS week.
Well, this summer, I had the opportunity to go up to Chicago with Andrew Barry to help Boogie with the VBS. And coming into this trip, it was a little late notice, but I was a little nervous, like, am I going to be able to get packed in time, or are the tickets going to be ready or whatever? But luckily, that was all settled. But I was a little nervous because never flown by myself with Andrew. But he was like, I got this, I've done this before. So I was like, okay. So we got there July 15th, Monday, and hopped right in. We had skit practice later that evening. Got our lines for Tuesday, so we had less than a day to memorize 20 plus lines. But it was just such a blessing to be able to just go for a week to somewhere you've never been, to just see different people in different area, really, just a lot of cornfields. VBS was a blast. It was just meeting new kids, being in a skit, being the good coach. It was just such a blessing, and having Boogie and his aunt and uncle take care of me and Andrew for a week was really just very kind of them. To Thursday evening, they took us to downtown Chicago, and that was very cool. We saw Chicago Bears Stadium. We saw a lot of stuff. But can't go through everything, but just real quick, thank you, Boogie, for letting me have the opportunity to go up to Chicago. Thank you, Heritage Baptist, if you're watching this. Thank you, Samuel, for driving me and Andrew to the airport and picking us up. Picking us up was not easy. having to wake up at midnight, come pick us up. So thank you. Thank you all for y'all's prayers and while we were away, and thank you.
Yeah, so he talked about having the flight schedules and the tickets prepared. Well, that fell apart. Daniel had mentioned the Microsoft, the computers crashed. Well, anyways, on their flight home, they were supposed to fly out of Chicago O'Hare, I think at 6 in the morning. So we left at 3:30 in the morning, left the house. We got to the airport, and the flight was canceled. And I think we spent like 3 hours there from like 5:30 to 8:30. And we could not get another flight. It was a mess. Anyways, we ended up getting them another flight, but it wasn't till 10 o'clock that night, and then that got delayed. So it was a whole fiasco getting them back, but glad they made it back in one piece. The church there at the beginning of the summer wasn't totally sure. I mean, I had been back there the previous summer. There's probably around 70 or 80 people. The church there is continuing to grow. We had a couple services with over 100 people there. It was really encouraging. There is, within the last year, there is a family, an older couple, mid-60s, that they've been Catholic their entire life. And they started listening to some preaching online and made professions of faith. They've been coming faithfully. They were baptized like the week before I got there. And then another lady who her sister was an Anglican priest. She made a profession of faith, was baptized, and then the Sunday after I left, a younger family that have been coming faithfully, they got baptized. So the Lord is continuing to build his church, and it's quite an encouragement being a part of a ministry like that. A huge blessing was being able to be mentored by my uncle. My uncle's the pastor there. It's great to be at a like-minded ministry. You know, if you know me, when ideas start popping in my head, I can get pretty energetic and excited about things, and you don't always know how it's going to rub people. And my uncle, he perfected the skill of saying graciously no to me many times, but he always had a great balance of encouraging me, showing me, okay, that's a good idea, but this is how you need to tweak it, and then sometimes just flat out saying, no, we're not doing that. But seriously, my uncle was a huge blessing to me, all the conversations we had. Can't say enough about my Uncle Keith. Probably the biggest highlight for me was the opportunities I had to preach. Preached on one Sunday night and then 2 Sunday mornings. And every time I preached, it was so encouraging to see the people's appetite for the word. People were hungry. They wanted to be fed from the word. And as I was leaving, people were saying, oh, we so appreciate your energy, your enthusiasm, your friendliness. And while I'm glad they are saying those things about me, I went away very sobered that these people need to be shepherded. They need to be fed. And I went away very sobered about my own need for continued growth in studying and effectively communicating the Word of God in pastoral ministry. There's a lot of providential stories throughout the summer, but my time is limited. My brother gave me a time cap. I think I talk too much. But one of the providential stories I do want to relay is throughout the whole summer, I've been planning on the last week of July going to Hong Kong, being with the Herbsters, helping them with their youth camp. And I had applied for my passport back in January. Anyways, it got declined the first time because I have dual citizenship. My birth certificate's Canadian. They think I'm a Canadian spy. They might deport me. I don't know. So anyways, I had reapplied for my passport back at the end of May, sent everything in that they asked for, and there's a little tool on the passport agency where you can check the application of your you can check the status of your application, and I was checking it 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, I paid for the expedited shipping, everything, and I was really looking forward to going to Hong Kong. And about the week before I was supposed to leave, I found out that it got denied again, and that was really discouraging because I've been praying so long for this, so confused, Lord, why aren't you allowing me to go on a trip like this? But because I didn't go, we started a kids Bible club on Friday nights, and the last Friday night kids club, there was a brand new family that we had no contact with, not from VBS, anything. And on the Sunday following, they ended up starting to come to church. And a lady in the church came up to me, this is my last Sunday, and she made me start crying, actually. She said, I am so glad you didn't go to Hong Kong. I'm like, okay, interesting. And she said, if you went to Hong Kong, we would not have done those kids' Bible clubs on Friday nights, and we would not have seen this family to church here on this Sunday. And you never know why the Lord closes doors, but there's always a purpose behind every circumstance you're in. And where the Lord closes one door, somewhere he opens a window. And so I'm thankful for all the opportunities from this summer. So it was a great blessing, and thank you for all your prayers. Glad to be back home, though, that's for sure.
Well, I am really excited to tell you about my trip to Zambia this past summer. I got to go with Dr. Barry, and it was incredible. Just meeting the people, seeing the culture, and just the opportunity for the gospel was absolutely incredible. So it was about 48 hours each way, and Dr. Barry and I definitely decided that something about us being on the same itinerary just makes for not a great recipe for success. We had 6 flights both ways, and we had a problem at every single airport that we went to. So we don't know if it was him or me, but one of us caused major problems. My luggage got lost both times. Well, the first time they just didn't put it on the plane. They were like, well, it looked heavy, so we just didn't put it on the plane. So it'll be there tomorrow, maybe. And so, fortunately, the one bag that got left off was all the stuff that I was taking over to Todd Beeman, the missionary that we were helping. And it showed up the next day. And then on the way back, my luggage was about a week late making it to Greenville. But it all made it back. So, if I can get this to work. So we were helping Todd and Kathy Beeman, who have been missionaries in Zambia since 2010. And he is the pastor currently of 2 churches. The first church in Chijiezo, he started as a result of a medical mission team through GFA. So they had the team, the gospel was presented, and then they met under a tree for several years before they got permission from the chief of that area to build a church. And then he is slowly handing that ministry off to a national pastor that was my translator. And we were in Muma, his new church plant. The team, so I'm not going to go through all the names. These are just the people that came, traveled to be there. Lots of different medical roles and experience levels. About 20 people that traveled to be on the team, and then all of the different nationals that helped us from not just Todd's 2 churches, but also there's a church in Chapata, which is like the city area, and that's pastored by Pastor Dan, who we also worked with. He was supposed to be a missionary to Mozambique, but God closed that door and opened, as Boogie said, a window for him to start a church in Zambia, and so he's been learning the language, and just a lot of people involved to make this church, this mission team, a success. And God really built this team. We were from all different places, 3 from Canada, several from South Carolina, several from Boston, Pennsylvania, all over the place. And I guess one of the first questions for me going on a trip like this is, okay, I'm not medical personnel, and I'm going on a medical team. And I think that question was true of some other people, too. We had a respiratory therapist. It's like, how am I going to use respiratory therapy when really that's not the kind of treatment we're doing? And even some really young medical students that didn't have any practical training. And yeah, it was really obvious that God put this team together specifically for this purpose. On the guy with the white coffee mug is Asher Vincent. He goes to Mount Calvary. And it was really cool because I didn't think I knew anyone else on the team. And I got there and I was like, Asher, I think I've heard that name before. And he comes up to me and he's like, I was your camper at Bob Jones' EDU camps. I was like, oh, I knew that name from somewhere. So that was really neat to reconnect with him. And here's all of the Zambian workers and all of us getting ready for clinic on the first day. So every morning started with preaching, and different ones of us got the opportunity to preach in the morning. Dr. Barry preached multiple times. I got to preach once, and it was interesting because it was just the way it worked out that I was going to be the one guy that got to go once. And I was kind of disappointed about that because I was like, oh, I had, other messages to give. And then we walk out that morning that I'm supposed to preach, and there were so many people. I mean, it was huge. It was the only day that we had to send away tons of people. And they were super attentive and listened well, and which wasn't true every morning. And it was really intimidating, but it was really, really awesome to be able to give the gospel and have them pay such close attention, and then have opportunities to discuss what I talked about, and then give the gospel again multiple times that morning. So we had, medically, we had dentistry. So me being kind of a floater in the end, we had 3 pastors, but only sometimes 1 translator, sometimes 2 to share. So I kind of ended up being the guy that if there was a translator for me, I would go preach. If there wasn't, I'd go find something else to do. So I got to pull 2 teeth. That was awesome. So yeah, I was going up in difficulty level by the end, so I was like looking for a 3rd, but didn't have time. So it's one of those things where several of us got the opportunity to learn how to pull teeth, and the youngest, Kate, looked like, I think after her first 2 teeth, she wanted to pull every tooth out of everyone's head that she could find. So it was really exciting and a really cool learning, growing experience there. Triage, we had 3 different people working in triage, and Kate had no experience, and I was a first responder in college, so I worked triage the first day, at least partially, teaching how to do blood pressures and basic things like that. So that was neat that even that short experience in college was helpful to contribute to the medical side of things. We gave out reading glasses, and I worked in the pharmacy the last 2 days, so I learned a lot of weird names for pills that I have no idea what they do, but I can count them, so that was exciting. Then we had church, and I will say, I told Dr. Barry, it was really impressive because our pews are perfect to prep you to go be a missionary in Zambia. Because I'm serious. Those pews there are more comfortable. They give a little bit, so it works out. So I'm like, you will be pleasantly surprised if you go. So, yes, I didn't understand most of the service because it was in Chichewa, but it was really a unique experience to be there. And one of the guys that I told you is going to become the pastor of the church in Chijiezo, he was my translator, and he did not very good at English. So we would read the bridge tract, and he would say, "We go read the bridge tract." I'm like, okay. And we'd go, and I would try and preach from the bridge tract, and eventually I realized he was just reading it with pauses in between to let me, preach what I was saying in English, and it wasn't really doing a whole lot of good. But his daughter and son-in-law's house burned to the ground while we were there, and he was there every day. And he would come with a huge smile and say, "We give the bridge tract." And he must have gone through that thing 100 times, the time that we were there, always with a smile on his face. And his family and all of his sons were there too. Like, their priority was giving the gospel with joy. And it was really a rebuke to me. I'm like, I don't think I'd be at church if my family were going through that, or if I was going through that. But here he is, like, not at church on a church day. He's here for clinic on the weekdays with a smile because the gospel is what's important to him. And I mean, it was just so cool to see that, our bond with them maybe couldn't understand the language all the time, but really we serve the same God and the same gospel, and God is still good even in hard things. And so the children's church, there were a lot of kids. I think there were almost 100 kids that Sunday at church, and we always had kids to minister to, which So every afternoon, I got to preach to the kids and give them candy. And so they knew me really well by the second day. I was like, Jonathan, more candy. I'm like, no, you have to listen to the preaching, and then I'll come play soccer with you afterwards. So it was really fun. The kids that came to the clinic were mostly 1st through 4th grade, so lower elementary school, but I mean, they were just anxious to listen, and I'd tell them a Bible story, give them the gospel, and you ready to go, or what do you want to do now? And they'd be like, you tell us more, teach us more. And so like, they would normally sit there with me for at least 45 minutes to an hour and let me go through different Bible stories and how it applied, and then the gospel, and then candy, and then they would go play soccer. On the way back, the second to last day, we came upon a bike and motorcycle accident on our way back from clinic, and it was already late, but we had all the medical personnel needed to jump out and help. So they were able to get him to the hospital safely, and he's doing well, and he's following up with Pastor Todd out there. So just even unique ministry in that way, that we were on site, and he probably wouldn't have gotten anything close to the help that he needed if we hadn't been there. So just God's provision, and then creating a contact for Todd. So yeah, the kids, I always had at least, I think that was the smallest group, but I always had a group of kids to talk to, and they were a lot of fun, but also just very needy. Most of them dressed in rags, very dirty, but always willing to listen to the gospel. That was something that was really unique about the ministry in Zambia. Here, it's people are too busy. You're like, oh, I don't have time to listen to you. Oh, I don't want your tract. There, it's like they want to. They want to hear. They are willing to sit and listen as you share. And there was a local business that set up right outside the clinic so they could sell food. And the first day that I saw them over there, I was like, has anyone gone and preached to them? And they're like, no. They're a local business, though, so you don't want to go over there. I was like, well, we'll go try. So I went, and they were probably the best audience I had that day. They listened. They stopped selling everything. They stopped all their business. If anyone wanted to buy something, they're like, no, you have to listen to this first. And I gave them the gospel and invited them to church, which several of them did come to church on Sunday. And then the next day they went and they came to the clinic, and they're like, you send a preacher over so you can teach us again? And so we got to teach them every day. Someone got to preach to them. So that was really unique. And then I want to spend really briefly, Yona. So I mentioned that one girl was a respiratory therapist. And she was like, she ended up doing malaria testing most of the time that we were there, except for Yona. Yona had really, really, really bad asthma, but no treatment. And he was in very serious condition when we met him and his dad. And in America, you just go to the hospital immediately for something like this. But there, you have to go to the clinic to be approved to go to the doctor. And if you don't have transportation, well, Muma was about 40 miles away from the hospital. So walking both ways 40 miles is pretty intense. And you have to go to the clinic first. So, and you don't even necessarily get recommended to go to the doctor at the hospital. So we were able to treat him, and Elise treated him every single day of clinic and Sunday. And the second day, he got a lot worse. He came in, his oxygen was at about 82%, which most kids should be at 94% or higher. And so he was in really, really bad shape. And so since he had to sit for 25 minutes doing the nebulizer treatment, it means he had nothing to do. So we went and we shared the gospel with him. And I was able to share with them multiple times. And the Monday of the last week of clinic, I mean, his dad was, I would wave at him and he would grin, like so huge. And he told us, he's like, he jumped the other day. He jumped yesterday and ran. He's acting like a boy again. And it was just really, to see the dad really cared for his son. And they listened to the gospel, but he got the help that he needed. And they came to church on Sunday, listened to the gospel, were receptive. We didn't push for any decisions while we were there at all. We would give the gospel and we would offer, here's what the Bible says: you call upon the name of the Lord and you shall be saved. And if you want to discuss that, we'd clarify with them more. But it was just, there are so many like Yonah and other individual stories that I could give, but just desperate need for the gospel here. And many of them, first time, we talked to 1,100 people, got the gospel at least. And it was just absolutely amazing. Last day of our trip, we went on a safari. That's a picture of the room that we had. It was like incredible. I mean, I don't think I've stayed in anywhere that nice, even in America. So it was pretty incredible. And so my favorite part about the safari was seeing the leopard. We like hunted all over for one, like into the night, and finally saw one right before we headed back. And then we get to I think 100 yards from where we were staying, and up a tree there's a leopard with a fresh kill. So it's like, oh, well, we are in the wild. It's like, that's why there are guards out here when I go walk outside at night. But yeah, so yeah, real close to where we were staying, there was a leopard up a tree, so cool. But pray for Zambia, and connect with Demon on Facebook if you want updates, because he regularly updates the ministry. Daniel Kroll was there with Camps Abroad. They're planning to go back for the next at least 2 years. So connect with that ministry. It is really, really good to see what to pray for. And then pray that the gospel would continue to work. We know that God promises his word won't return void, and a lot of people receive the gospel, but it's going to be repeated watering and planting in most cases before they see a harvest there. So just keep praying. And then, even if you don't know how God's going to use your specific skills, go on a mission trip. It is absolutely incredible to go and give the gospel, and we need it here too. Everywhere needs the gospel, and there will never be a shortage of need. So go.
All right, well, let me have all the teens come up here who are going to be giving a testimony, and maybe you guys can just sit on the front row. Do a short video, 3-minute video, to show you some of the sights and sounds. We had a great trip, and the teens did a wonderful job. This was mostly our older teens, just the nature of the trip in the city. We touched all 5 boroughs, and we just barely touched Bronx. If you know anything about Bronx, we weren't there long. Very needy. Pray for Bronx. The pastors in the city are scratching their heads about how to get into Bronx. Very just gang infested, and almost impossible for churches to get started. Most of the time we spent in Queens with Pastor Dan Klaus. Pastor Tim Richmond and Pastor Matt Rucker were the other 2 pastors that we spent some time with, but Pastor Dan Klaus in Queens, New York City. And we spent a lot of time in parks and in subway stations, on the street, and those were kind of the main areas, and then did some services for the different churches. I want to show you a video, and actually the song that's played in the video is a song called "Help Me Win the Lost," and you may have heard it before. We would turn this song on when we were driving through the streets of the city and just looking at people all over. And some of us that had AirPods, we'd listen to it on the subway as we were going, and just seeing people all over. And so a powerful song in the context where we were. Here's some sights of that time. we did have some fun and some sightseeing as well. You saw pictures. That's where most of our pictures came. But it was a busy time. I'm going to have the kids, they're all limited to 30 seconds. So they're going to bang, bang, bang. Just a quick highlight of one thing from the trip, and then I'll finish it.
Two things that stuck out from this trip. One thing was just walking through the streets and seeing the people's faces. No one had true joy. No one had true peace. And a city that's supposed to be where you're supposed to live it up and that's supposed to be the best place, no one had true joy. And that was a big thing that stuck out to me. And then the second thing was, I even texted Mrs. White about this when we were there, but it was so cool to have the opportunity to use Brianna tracks in the streets, because God used that. Even if they wouldn't take a tract for the church, if I shared a little bit of Brianna's story with somebody, they would take that because they were emotionally connected to it, and they would read her story. And that was just so cool to see how God was even using that time, and we could take those tracks and use it in people's lives in New York. So that was just really cool.
Well, I thank the Lord for the opportunity we had to go to New York. It was a very different pace than it is down here in Little Easley. The hustle and bustle of the big city was a bit overwhelming at times. And thankfully, the way that our schedule was worked out, we had a lot of downtime between the different activities. Whether it was at the church, resting, waiting for Samuel and Pastor Klaus to tell us when and where we were going, or sitting on the subways for 30 minutes or sometimes even more. It was just a good opportunity to listen to music, and that song Samuel talked about, Help Me Win the Loss. It's quickly become one of my favorite songs, but those times were also a great time to pray. God specifically used those times in my heart, and I'm sure he did in the hearts of the rest of the teens. Thank you for your prayers for each of us while we were on our trip. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm not a teen, but I got to go with the teens on the ministry trip, so it was a really cool opportunity. But if you saw, while Samuel was preaching on Sunday, I got to be security guard for the church upstairs, so that was pretty cool. But just got to watch all these people walk by the church, tried to smile at them and be friendly. But one thing that stuck out was just the diversity and all different kinds of nations represented there. And this book, Behold the City, was like our reading assignment, and I don't want to talk about it too much because somebody else is going to talk about it, but I wanted to read this real quick. He said in his book, Pastor Recker, which is one of the pastors we were working with, he said, people still come to the major cities seeking for the security that the city cannot ultimately provide. They come to New York City from Africa, Europe, Russia, Asia, and the West Indies, South America, and nearly every other nation on earth. And he's emphasizing the point that there's some countries that we can't get to with the gospel, partly because just the government, you can't go and start a church in some nations, but people from those nations come to New York City, and the opportunity that it is to minister to people from all over the world that we might not otherwise be able to interact with. But there's also just a beauty in the church there, just how many different kinds of people there were. There was a Filipino family, African American, but the former pastor was a Romanian, and there was a lot of Eastern European people in that neighborhood around there. And like even the white people weren't even like American. They were from other countries, like European countries. And there was very little of like our culture. There was so much diversity, and we even got to eat at an Ecuadorian restaurant, which was pretty cool. Fantastic food. But it was just awesome to see the beauty and the opportunity to minister to so many different people, but then the beauty of who God is saving from all tribes and tongues and nations. He is building his church in New York City with saving all of those people.
Well, obviously a really, really cool opportunity. But my favorite thing personally to do when we went on this trip was the subways. We got to play our instruments. Priscilla and I were able to do violin. The boys played trumpet. We were able to sing. And one night we were in there for like hour and a half, 2 hours, and we passed out like hundreds and hundreds of tracks. Just so many people coming and going. And
like we were only there for an hour and a half, but it was so cool to see the Word of God at work, like on people's faces. Joel mentioned like there's no joy in these people's faces, and the impact that our faces of like even in our countenance as we're singing, the difference that that made was really cool. And obviously there were so many different responses. Some people took it, some people weren't as happy with it, but personally, like it was such a challenge, even now that we're home, to pray for the people, the hundreds of people that we saw. And this isn't my, Priscilla's giving about a lady she met in the park, but I also met a lady, and I got her name and got her story, and even just the challenge to keep praying for these people. As just I mentioned, there's so many different countries represented, and just the challenge as we're home, to think even that specific night we were in the subway and pray for all of those souls that were touched with the gospel that night.
So I'm sure you guys saw in some of the pictures we did balloon making in the park. And honestly, balloon making was not my thing. But after I had popped like 5 balloons, I was like, I'm done with this. There was a lady, she had 2 kids. We had probably given her like 10 balloons. And so I went over and started talking to her, and she was a lady from Poland. She had moved like 15 years ago. And as I got to share my testimony with her and the gospel, I was asking her about her church background, and it was very Catholic in Poland, but she definitely had like a resentment against it, and she talked a lot about how it was just tradition and her family would go every week, but she felt like it never changed anything in their life, in the daily life. And but recently she said that she's realizing that she does need God somewhat in her life. So she quit her job. She's becoming a stay-at-home mom. She's trying to become a better mom. She's taking better care of her health. But they actually, before I talked to her, they had bought Bibles for her, her husband, and her 2 kids a week and a half before I talked to her. And it was New Testaments actually, and they had just started reading through it. And I don't know if you guys know, my grandparents they were in the Catholic background. And so I got to share their story with her, which was really neat. But you can pray for her because she's scared to go to church because she hasn't had a church wedding. She's not in a good relationship with her partner, she called him, and her kids haven't been baptized. And this week I was listening to a video as a short gospel presentation, and it seemed so similar to her life, and it was talking about how all these people, before they get saved, they want to clean up their lives. And so you can pray for her that God would humble her, that you can't clean up your life before you get saved to come to Him, but that it's nothing of yourself and broken of truly the sinful state that you are to become saved. So you can pray for her and her 2 kids. That her name was Monica.
Well, Josiah gave me a little bit of a lead-in, so hopefully I won't go over the time limit, but we'll see about that. As he mentioned, in preparation for this ministry trip, we read the book called Behold the City by Matt Recker, and it was a really good book. It was also a really challenging book. The first chapter, like a couple pages in, I was like nailed. One of the phrases was that as you minister in the city, you cannot focus on the negatives. Your focus has to be on the people. And I was challenged because I remember when this ministry trip was first mentioned, that my brain immediately went to the negatives. I was like, I've never been to New York. New York's scary. Like, lots of negatives went through my mind. But I was just challenged, like, my focus has to be on the people, the souls that we're seeking to give the gospel to. And we got the privilege to meet the author, Pastor Matt Recker. And the coolest thing was that what he had written, he wrote this book in like the early 2000s, what he had written in that book, there was no disconnect between his passion for souls today. The same passion that you see in that book is the heartbeat that he has for souls that he's ministering to today. And it was just such a challenge, and even as wherever we're ministering, our focus has to be on the souls. So.
Well, Ridgewood, Queens, New York City is 2 square miles, has 176,000 people, one church. And there's neighborhood after neighborhood with hundreds of thousands of people that don't have churches. It's incredible. It's mind-blowing to think about the amount of people and so few churches. And you can't walk out of there but say, we have to have a movement that goes and gets population centers. We've got to get the cities of our country, and we've got to do the Apostle Paul and go target these big cities. And so really challenged. I'll share one story. I don't know if you saw in the video. I took a selfie with a man in the background raising his hand because I'm in a church auditorium. That was in Brooklyn, a little sketchy area in Brooklyn. We were quickly getting out of there. In fact, we were on our way out, and that guy stopped us and said, "Hey, man, what you doing?" And and showed him the church cards. He said, "Hey, come in here." He lifted up these garage doors, basically, right on the corner of a church, bars, kind of guarding it, unlocked it all, let us in. Probably about the size of this platform right there was a church building, a church auditorium, right in the middle of this. And that man started to tell us his story. This neighborhood, very not friendly to the things of the Lord. His church had been burned down. He said he gets beat up about every other week. He barely has any teeth left, but he says, we're going to keep going. They're going to tear our church down. We're going to build it back up. And the kids are coming to Sunday school, and we're trying to get their parents. And he said, "Scrawny white boy, you might not make it here." And I said, "You're right. That's why you're here, and we need you. But we also need we need to find ways to even equip the people who live there to reach their own people at a real burden for that." So thank you all for your prayers, helping enable it. And we did eat a ton of food, spent way too much money on the ethnic food, but that was a highlight. Well, we're going to dismiss here. I'm going to turn over to Pastor, but I do want to mention we passed out just a quick glimpse at the calendar for this coming year. That's just to give you a little feel of what's coming up. Most of the things you're going to be familiar with. It's on the Google Calendar. Throw that sheet away after you leave here and check the Google Calendar, because that's where we'll add and adjust things. Just want to give you a feel. Two things, though, that you're going to want to stay tuned for that are new. We're doing VBS in the park the month of September and April on Saturday mornings, 10 to 11:30. That'll primarily be a college ministry, but we can also talk about other ways. Some of us others can be involved. And then Connection Sunday, we have those 3 times throughout this year. Stay tuned. We'll give more information about how that'll work. Just want to put those dates in front of you and help alert your attention to be thinking for more information.
All right, aren't you glad to know that all this time you're sitting on our pews is preparation for missions in Zambia, of all things? So we're getting you ready for it. And I have a number of notes to myself of things that I'll probably emphasize coming out of this, but wasn't it a great blessing tonight to hear these things? I'm going to hold off on about a half dozen of those that we'll emphasize another time. Let me say one thing that kept coming to my mind, though, was 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14 says, "Neglect not the gift which is in you." So Paul's stirring Timothy up. Serve with the gifting that God has given you, and really devote yourself. And then he says in verse number 15, "Meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all." So you can hear a number of motivations, and there would be a number of scriptural motivations to serve, ultimately for the glory of God, right? And then for the good of very needy people, which we have heard. But you never invest yourself in ministry to others for God and for others without growing yourself. That's one of the themes I kept hearing, and we heard it in some ways even more distinctively. I prepared to minister to others, but God was doing something in me as I was ministering to others. And let me just encourage you again, serve God for his glory, serve God for the good of others, but you'll never lose. You will grow yourself through the ministry. Thank the Lord for these testimonies. Let's stand together, and we're going to pray and be dismissed. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the occasion to rejoice in you. Thank you for opening doors of opportunity We heard testimonies from these few and several ministries. They represent dozens of others, and we thank you even for the emphasis as we began on Vacation Bible School and week-to-week ministry here. And just thank you for opening doors and allowing us to serve you. And thank you for the testimonies of the way that you granted the words to speak, that very utterance, the wisdom to speak, and even for moving in hearts that there would be a bold proclamation of truth. And thank you for victories already won. And Lord, we seek of you that you would let your word continue to run. There are victories that are yet to be won, even from ministry that went out this summer. And so we do pray that you would win victories. Would you water what's been planted, and would you bring a harvest out of the ministry that was given? And in many cases, we're confident we won't even know about it until we're with you in glory, but we thank you for the confidence that we can have that you are at work. Thank you even for the testimonies that help to remind us of that. And so we, Lord, ask that you would just strengthen us to give ourselves again with a renewed commitment to serving you with the opportunities you put in front of us every day and week to week. And we know that not only will you be glorified, others reached, but we can be confident that you'll work in our lives. And so we thank you so much for all of this tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.